Welcome back, everyone, to the Comics Cube. I'm back with J.H. Williams III, and again, we are going through the latest issue of Echolands. This time, it's issue number 4. How are you doing today?
Good. Ready to go.
So, before we start with this issue, I saw on Twitter that you have a new reader who binged the first 3 issues of Echolands and immediately saw something I didn't, which is in the back end, in the fake ads, you have you're looking for a little dragon named Betty, and this reader actually found Betty in the pages of Echolands number 1. I thought it was a joke, and I didn't even bother.
It could be. It could be.
It could be. So there's no confirmation. I thought it was a joke. I didn't even bother looking for Betty. This person has it for like a day and actually finds Betty.
It's because it's all fresh at the same time. They got to read all 3 at once, and they're like, "Hey, that reminds me of such and such." So,
let's talk as usual about the cover first and foremost. What went into this cover? It kind of looks like a yin and yang symbol to me. I don't know if that was intentional.
Interesting, a little bit. Also wanted it to kind of feel like, a threat spiraling around her in darkness, clearly underwater. But I didn't want it to be an underwater scene where it's lots of blue. I wanted it to feel dark and kind of oppressive,
Very deep.
Yeah, and that her expression is, one of fear, maybe a little lost of control, trapped. So, which I think is appropriate for what happens. So
it is very appropriate for what happens, and also the circular motion fits right into the logo.
Yeah, which was nice. It wasn't something I didn't plan on, like with the bubbles trailing from her mouth, the oxygen bubbles. The credits running practically right into that was very fortuitous. I didn't realize it was going to work that way until I put the logo on. I'm like, hey, that's kind of cool. So
it wasn't intentional, but it worked out serendipitously.
Yeah,
that's perfect. The first page of this book, so this is entitled Hope's Crucible. The first page, we're taking a look at the metaphysicist looking upwards. We have a little silhouette of Hope. And then you do this thing with the DNA strings and what I think are atoms.
Which part?
This one?
Oh no, that's the same orbs that we've seen in the background of the previous issues with the opening shots. There's those orbs, in there, and I don't want to say what it is. We'll explain what it is when we get to it. But
okay,
so it has to do with the final war. And there's, so like in the previous issue, there's that scene, the first page scene where Romulus with Torch Grinder, they're on one of them and you can see some of them in the background.
Oh, and here I am thinking it's moving from DNA to other building blocks, but
it's sort of symbolic.
Yeah.
And when we reveal what the secret of the Echolands is, it's symbolically important.
I feel like there's a whole theme in this very specific issue. Actually, I guess with all of Echolands, but very specifically this issue about the dichotomy between fate and free will, because it starts off with a monologue about Hope saying, like, I don't believe in fate. It's not fate. I did it. I did everything. And then in the back with Here We Ego, which, as we've mentioned before, can be a commentary on you and Hayden doing this book. It's got the little robot saying, we should stick to the map. We drew it for a reason. And the big robot is saying, but this way is shiny.
Yeah, I mean, it's like one of those things about I can see how that could be extrapolated about, what is random or or planned versus what is fate. Um, and sometimes we can feel like those things kind of go hand in hand sometimes, you know.
Really?
I think so. So like, as an example, when something good happens in your life or something bad happens in your life, sometimes you can kind of see like maybe that was fated to be, and now you have to figure out how to navigate that and work with that, because it is, it's in front of you, you have to deal with it, right? So it's almost like that old perspective about, you know, um, the world will test you, or the universe will test you by throwing obstacles in your way, and it's how well you deal with them. You know what I mean? So that's a little bit to me like what fate could be. And her point of view about it is sort of like she wants to feel like, no, it's all me, I'm the one in control. But we show parts of this in this very issue where she's not in control
At
you
all.
know yeah, so it's sort of like it's that push and pull I think that the human mind has about trying to understand and relate to um, the perception of things coming at them in their life. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that plays in throughout all the whole issue, and not even just with Hope.
Yeah.
But in one of the things that struck me while reading this book was the first 9 pages of this issue are one image.
Almost.
This is not the first time you've done this, nor is it even the second time you've done this.
Right.
But what possesses a man to do such a thing?
I don't know, just trying to like, from a design sense, to keep it interesting and create flow, and try to make, I think in this particular case, it adds to the bigness of the action. And you know, two powerful beings going against each other and kind of making it so big that it won't fit on the page. But at the same time, we do get the individual moments. And so trying to find an interesting way to make that visual, I guess, you know, in a way that you might not expect.
Speaking of two powerful beings going against each other, we're talking about Romulus and the wizard's daughter.
Yeah.
And I think 4 issues in, you have very clearly established that there's a sense of danger in this book. People keep dying or coming close to dying or looking like they're dying.
Yeah.
Is anyone safe at all?
I don't think so.
Including Hope.
Possibly.
Possibly Hope.
Yeah.
And with Romulus, especially looking more and more like a Kirby character, the more you get into the action, right down to the Kirby crackles.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a style I struggle with.
Really?
I feel like I'm always trying to crack that code with that style. So every time I draw him, I look at it as a new opportunity to learn something about that style and how to make it effective. I still don't have it mastered for sure. You know, there's something about Kirby's understructure that I haven't figured out how to master. But the inspiration is clear. That's what's important to me. The inspiration is clear, and we'll see how well we are able to capture it the more I do it, and the more we see, like when we eventually see where he's from, and try to capture that more and more while still making it not just a pastiche. You know, that it still has my flavors on it. You know what I mean? So
yeah. What makes it so difficult? Is it the fact that his anatomy is so, you know, Kirby's anatomy is so weird?
yeah, I think so. I've had a discussion with some people about Kirby as he evolved. I think he became more interested in cubism.
I see that.
Geometric shapes, I think, really began to fascinate him a lot. And that started to apply to his understructure of the characters. And that's why his anatomy is so peculiar. But the result is that, he has this geometric construct for his anatomy, but then the inking has this graphic, bold, most often smoothness to it, that those two combinations somehow create this incredible energy. And that's the part, I think it's the understructure part that I have the most trouble with, is understanding how geometric should it be underneath all that stuff. And that's the part I think I really struggle with.
I do feel like the people who have most successfully emulated Kirby are the ones you wouldn't call them realistic, like Walt Simonson.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what is the style that you're most comfortable you doing?
Oh, I don't know. I guess kind of more traditional classical. You know, I part of it, growing up teaching myself how to draw, you always struggle to understand anatomy really, really well. And so that tends to lean you towards being more classical in how the human form is represented. And I think that comes across a lot in my work. And that's probably why trying to capture the effect that Kirby has is so difficult, because you spend your whole life trying to master the human form, and then here you're doing something where no, it's an emulation of human form, but relying on geometrical shapes.
Yeah,
and it is completely not anatomically correct, but yet he makes you believe that character is real because of the energy that he has in it. And it's so fascinating to me stylistically what he can do. And especially because like those shapes even will appear in the way he'll put shadows on something, not just the understructure, but like the black shadows sometimes will be these round shapes, and it's super cool.
It's fascinating.
Yeah. It's so incredible. And so I think he's combined that idea of geometry as an understructure, but then also being super fascinated with cultural art, which comes across very much in all of his design sense. All the trappings he puts on top, you can see his love of cultural art, ancient art. It's all in there, and that kind of, it's amazing. So
one might say that his design sense echoes his love for other things. I think the most concise and accurate way that I've seen Kirby described, I was talking to Ron Friends, and he said he's not telling you that this is what a kick looks like. He's telling you this is what a kick feels like.
Yes. Exactly. That's the thing. So like for me, I've learned how to flub anatomy. After learning anatomy, I've learned how to flub anatomy in various ways, but not the way Kirby did it, in order to gain that emotional effect. So as an example, some of the illustrations I've done in Horror Hill, where we're dealing with like zombies or whatever, one of the things I learned was do all the anatomy completely wrong. So they feel more horrific because of it. That sort of manipulation. Or like you said, how do you make the kick or the punch feel it? Where does the end, trying to capture that energy? It's just my take on it is radically different than Kirby's. And I don't know if anyone can touch Kirby's level of energy. Simonson comes close, but even his feels different than Kirby.
Yeah. He's not trying to copy Kirby. It's more like emulate what the feeling is.
Yeah, that energy, that sense of energy. And Simonson very much, you can tell he's interested in texture versus Kirby. A lot of Kirby stuff is almost all the same texture in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And structure too, like 3-dimensional structure.
Yeah. And Simonson, this might sound weird, but I almost imagine like Simonson's work when I look at it, it's like the sensibility and drama and dynamics of Kirby with a European inking touch.
Like stereotopy.
Yeah.
Yeah, like stereotopy. Yeah.
I can kind of see that in there,
Who did you learn? Who did you emulate the most to study anatomy when you were younger?
Let's see, probably Michael Golden.
Oh yeah.
Who also has a very interesting take on anatomy. Probably Michael Golden a lot, a little bit of Byrne, but also artists like Thomas Yates.
Yeah.
Or Wally Wood or Alex Raymond.
Really classical people.
Yeah, and I think it kind of shows a little bit because my stuff can be such a hybrid. Those little things come out here and there depending on the shot I'm doing or the what I'm trying to convey in the figure for that particular moment, or if a character needs to look a certain way.
How do you make all of these styles look like they naturally fit in the same world?
I don't know. I've been asked this question before. The only thing I can think of is everything is approached with the same sense of thought and making sure that the environments that they're in are grounded in a way that it makes sense that a big burly guy like Core can be standing next to someone like Hope, and you can believe that they're in the same reality, even though they are stylistically so different from each other. I think because I rely on backgrounds a lot to make sure the scenes are set, and I think that goes a long way for that effect.
That's true.
And then making sure it works in black and white well enough, but when we get to the color stage, the color reinforces all those things, and they're all treated with the same level of richness. And it's interesting too, because going back a little bit about the flow of the anatomy. I mean, if you look at Core, his anatomy is all over the place. I mean, he's not realistic looking at all. And he's this massive guy, and how broad he is depends on the shot that I'm going for,
Very animalistic, Core's anatomy.
Yeah.
One of my favorite Kirby techniques is the extreme close-up. Just making sure that everything is cramped into a particular panel. Now, the thing is, anyone else would have made these 2 pages on the same spread.
Right.
And so therefore, because, and also it would have been the same spread, partly because maybe they could sell it later on. I don't know. What was the inspiration for splitting this up?
Again, like the amount of action going on between the 2 pages, I think if we tried to put that on to a single spread, it wouldn't have felt as big. It would be much more cramped. And so I think by splitting it up like that, even though it has this flow with each other, it adds that sense of drama, and it's fun, so
it's an interesting, non-obvious choice. So Hope and her team escape, and I just have to ask about this little sound effect, sloosh bubble.
I don't know. I don't. I try to come up with weird sound effects from time to time, even if it's something serious. Just trying to. Maybe if you say it longer, it sounds.
Sloosh bubble. You know what it reminds me of? Hey, it's a Jim Steranko effect.
Oh, yeah.
The sound effect that says, hey, it's a Jim Steranko effect. And then they escape and they get into this wonderful and beautiful setting here with all of these mushroom type.
Yeah.
I don't know what to call them. Structures.
Yeah. Yeah. They're kind
mushroom
of like
type
giant
structures.
mushrooms. Yeah.
So are they? So have they completely escaped Romulus's realm at this point, or is it?
Yeah, I mean, in that scene there, they're far enough away from Treasure Island.
Yeah.
Uh, that plume of fire and soot from the damage being done to the island, they basically are getting away from that. So
I also noticed that the ship that they're on has the letters E on the back of the seats.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
What is the significance of this?
I can't tell you. That E appears elsewhere.
That E does appear elsewhere.
Yep.
As does another E.
It's been in previous issues.
As does another E. As does another letter E. So they get out. What is the inspiration for these very gigantic mushrooms?
I don't know. I just wanted something, even though it was going to be this underwater aquatic scene, I wanted something that you wouldn't expect to see underneath the ocean. And so I don't know for whatever reason, just giant mushrooms came into my mind because it makes me think of something very strange. And that led me to think about, well, then their colors should be kind of strange too. Instead of using a color that you would expect to see under the water, I went and discussed it with Dave. I'm like, what do you think of, yellows and oranges, something or some other form of bright color that you wouldn't expect to see? And he was all for that. And the result is cool because it feels magical,
Yeah, it's a complete 180 from where we just were.
Exactly.
Castrum is still in danger at this point, and then he says, the devil has come for me, and we see a big giant cave type statue in what I can only assume was inspired by King Neptune / Poseidon.
Yep, exactly right.
Is it King Neptune / Poseidon?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a statue of Poseidon.
It's a statue of Poseidon. Okay. And then they go into the mouth there's a structure in there, and then they run into some mermaids / sirens who are monstrous. What is the thought process behind making these mermaids horrible monsters?
I don't know. We just wanted something. When we came up with the scene, we thought about using mermaids right away, and we wanted them to be dangerous. We didn't want them to be, and that led us to like, well, then their visage should be threatening, especially because it's such a short scene. So it makes you feel like, okay, yeah, they're clearly inspired by mermaids, but there's something else as well. So
yeah,
unique to the Echolands, so.
And you have and once again Hope loses control of her power, which costs Dina her arm. Was that always the plan to eventually? No, really. When did you decide to cut off her other arm?
Well, we kind of like when we decided to have this moment where she loses control. It was a long discussion, multiple discussions actually between Hayden and I, where we're deciding how often to show her power. And I felt like, well, we hadn't really seen her use her power since issue 1.
That's
So
true.
yeah, and so I kind of felt like we need to hit that note. We need to do it in a way, and he ended up agreeing, that we need to show it again, but do it in a way that costs them something, not just the main cast, now that you've gotten to know them a little bit. And it was important to show that because I felt like we couldn't go a whole arc and not show it again. It just, good storytelling sense told my gut that no, we need to show it again. And so in the circumstances, we figured this was an ideal place to do it because they're underwater. The thing is filling up with water because the mermaids have broken it open. They're trapped. It's dark. They don't know where they are. That whole sense of panic that could cause, is a different losing control than saying being trapped by, soldiers in an alleyway. It's completely different, and so we kind of like, it's kind of cool because it shows her losing control for different reasons. But because of their circumstances and where they're located and they're in this metal machine, what happens? What does that mean? Is there some sort of pressure that happens? What happens? And so we're like, okay, well, it breaks the thing apart. And I'm like, well, if it breaks the thing apart, we both were like, well, then something needs to happen to somebody. But we didn't want to kill anyone from it. We didn't want to kill and we didn't want to do the thing that Rosa fears. But we want to get close to that.
Right.
And hit home how dangerous it can be. And Dina's alive purely by luck, when you think about it. So
now, with
that Rosa thought to go back for Dina,
Yeah, with Dina, we're 4 issues in. You can't any new piece of fiction, anyone reading it will start shipping people and everything. So I have noticed that Rosa is very protective of Dina.
Yeah.
Is there anything going on over there?
Oh, well, no.
Okay.
No.
That's not going to stop people from thinking.
That's not a spoiler. No.
Okay.
We haven't really thought about those types of relationships with the other characters outside of Core and Hope. I don't know if we'll do anything like that as we go. We haven't thought about that, making that kind of decision with anyone. And there's a scene coming up in the next issue that might speak to some of Rose's, perspectives on that. So
okay, yeah, because I don't know, like the last year and a half that I've been more active on Twitter, I've noticed that people can find the smallest scene, and
they do. It's so funny. It's interesting that people do that. But she's also shown protectiveness of Castrum too.
Of everyone else, actually.
Yeah.
Except for Hope.
Except for Hope.
She really doesn't like her. But everyone also does seem to really like Castrum.
That they kind of look out for him?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not just because he's in danger, right?
It's sort of like that thing. It's like, I think it shows a sense of moral code for the group that this guy, he's dying. How do we keep him alive? Can we keep him alive long enough to get help to prevent him from dying?
Yeah.
I think it just shows a good moral integrity for the entire cast, and it's done so without being, hitting people over the head with it. No one is saying, "Oh, we got to look out for Castrum." It's sort of like we feel like it's the automatic good part of humanity. It's just automatic, So
just look out literally for the little guy. And Dina, is there any Mobius influence going on with Dina's style?
Oh yeah, yeah,
Okay.
a little bit.
I would think more than a little bit. Recurring motifs. They enter a passage that is in the shape of a triangle.
Yeah.
The jewel that Hope stole is in the shape of a triangle, happens to be a key.
Yeah.
And they go into the passage, and there is this big Kirby type statue underneath the passage, which I suppose will be explained in the history of Echolands when you get around to telling it.
A little bit. There's a I will say there's a certain aspect of some of the visual decor that you'll see in places throughout the series that historically is relevant to Echolands, but not maybe not culturally relevant to Echolands. So
Okay.
when we reveal the secret of what this place is, some of those features might make a little more sense without having them be directly connected to any particular thing.
Okay. That's interesting. That's an interesting teaser. Moving to the future. There's a song that is playing from the plasma tones.
Yeah.
It is dated 1984, unless that is the title
The real
of
1984.
the real 1984, which might be which means it might have come out before 1984.
Correct. Or not.
Or not. And Rosa says that she saw them live like 100 years ago. I don't know if she's doing that thing where people exaggerate or if she actually means 100 years ago, which prompts me to ask. Which prompts me to ask, what year is this taking place in?
We're not specifying on purpose.
So. Oh, okay. So it could actually have been 100 years ago, as Rosa says.
Yeah.
She is a vampire. And the song that is playing is very foreboding of what's about to happen.
Yeah.
And we meet the metaphysicist finally outside of that back matter. What is there any hints going on in the little background here behind the metaphysicist?
Well, it's a menagerie of things. And we get a little bit more explanation about that from the metaphysicist as in the next issue about why there's all these objects. The biggest clue is more of what we've already seen, really, in the fact that there are all these various objects from different, what look like could be different eras and different lands. So there's various subtle differences in the style of those objects too, which is a little bit difficult to convey because a lot of them are small. And when they're all batched together like that, it can be hard to differentiate. But I think Dave did a really good job at reinforcing that with some of the color choices he made, style color choices. So there's different styles in there, but they're not like glaringly different. But it's sort of like, this is all stuff from around the Echolands that this Oracle has collected
throughout the course of time.
Yeah.
I see an egg. And when I see an egg in a comic, I'm like, is that going to hatch at some point? You don't have to answer that. Is it in your mind? Is anyone do the plasma tones sound like anyone from the real world?
Probably closest to my view would probably be the Ramones.
I can see that.
Yeah. What was it in the back of the back quote on one of the issues? I don't know if you've really paid much attention to that, but the back quotes are all from the Echolands.
Yeah.
And one of them was from Joey Plasmatone, which Joey Ramone. So
I see that. Okay. There's also the Plasmatones reunion tour
oh yeah,
with
in the back.
in the back with special guest We Are the Unburied, which, given Rosa's comment, I'm wondering, are they from Horror Hill?
I'd say so. Yeah. Yeah.
Subject to change should you choose to change it.
Yeah. I
Okay.
mean, we give some hints about the fact that they're still around, and that they're probably vampires. So I don't know if we'll ever show them, if we ever get to show them, but yeah.
But at this point, never say never.
Yeah.
And then again, we're talking about the dichotomy between free will and fate, because even the Oracle says, I thought there'd be 6 of you.
Yeah.
When you and Hayden were planning this out, were there originally 6 people in this scene?
No.
So it was always going to be 5. And
Yeah.
okay.
Well, actually, it wasn't when we originally were going to have that scene. It wasn't even this entire cast. It was just originally going to be Hope and Core and Rabbit. So
That's
when we got
completely
to-
different.
Yeah, when we got to the writing and had developed the broader cast, different decisions were made, keeping the scene that we intended, but a variation of that scene.
It's a major variation considering that Rabbit isn't around here.
Right.
I feel like they'll be reunited with him soon, eventually, though. With you get into the Oracle's lunch dining room. There we go.
Yeah.
The Oracle's dining room, and then the Oracle says it was fate, and then Hope says there is no such thing as fate. Right above them, we see the Fates, a picture of the Fates, including one of them about to cut a string, which is usually a symbol that says now anything is game, anything can happen.
Right.
What are you trying to tell us with this little mural here?
Well, one of the things is I wanted to come up with, just on a superficial level, come up with iconography that backed up what the Oracle is saying, and have various symbols around that kind of spoke to the things that involves the Oracle. So the fact that the Oracle believes in fate and that something is destined to happen has a lot to do with the fact that the Oracle clearly can see at least parts of the future, right? So for being like that, fate would be very important, because to them, no, that's destined to happen. I've seen it, right? So them prescribing to symbols of fate makes a lot of sense. The other symbol that's in that room, which is not so obvious, is all the panels are actually the all-seeing eye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's on top of the door too.
Yeah. I don't know how many other people would catch that sort of thing, but I thought I would mention it.
I think
someone like the Oracle can see, because they see the future, might see patterns and things. So like when the Oracle talks about the lyrics of the song, he actually talks about the lyrics of all their songs, where he said, I see stuff in their lyrics. And and when you look at some of the song titles, even on the record, you can kind of see like, oh, are they talking about things that are going to happen, or is he just extrapolating and applying that he can see those connections because he can see into the future? And so every little tidbit makes him like, oh, maybe that means this, or maybe that means that, sort of thing, which I think someone who could see the future a bit, that would make sense.
Yeah. you can see the future a bit, so you can kind of tie it together. But in case you're wrong, you can ignore it because there's all the other stuff
Right.
that you got right.
Yeah. Right.
I do feel like for all the stuff in the comic that I do see, there is so much in this comic, and you can confirm if I'm right or wrong, that I think there's a lot of stuff that I haven't even brought up because I haven't seen them.
Like, what do you mean?
Well, like Betty.
Oh, right.
Like Betty's one.
Yeah, I mean, we try to pepper, things in there that could be clues about what the Echolands is. Could be clues about where we're going with some of the story, or like even just little random things like that. That's just a random throw in sort of thing. It's not like something orchestrated with tidbits like with Betty. It's just like, oh, hey, let's do that. That's fun.
Or even the little orbs in the beginning.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You are one of the people, like, I do notice, like one of the very few comics artists who will take a symbol, and you will put it into, you'll put it into the storytelling, you'll devote a whole panel to it, you'll uh and you'll use those as recurring motifs. Like, where did you pick that up from? Because I feel like that's a rarity in comics.
I don't know. It's hard to say particularly where that got started. Probably early on, I could trace it back to my days in school when I took a couple advertising art and design classes. And the main thing the teacher wanted to convey to the students was, regardless of how good you could draw or how creative, how good you are at executing your creative idea with your talent, he says, what are you trying? It's more, he made it more about, what are you trying to say? What's the thought behind the idea? That's where you got to focus your attention. And I think some of that started to present itself in my comics work. Wasn't there right away, but I think maybe in more subtle ways it was there. And then as I got more and more into trying to do my own thing or tell comics in a way that I thought was kind of interesting with my own voice, those things started to come up more. And then when I got on to something like Promethea,
Yeah, the 5 different suns for each different Promethea.
Right. All that stuff, that was the platform that said, okay, well, here's a perfect concept to like see how that can be utilized in the form of storytelling. And it made a lot of sense that for it to develop there, because so much about the ideas in Promethea itself is about the power of symbols.
Yeah.
So and so the more I thought about that, the more I began to extrapolate, and kind of got to a point where I can't see going back to any other way of doing it, even if it's not so obvious.
I
Sometimes
feel
I'm super overt about it, and other times I'm not. So
I feel like you were already doing that with Chase to a certain extent,
a
like
little
you said.
bit,
Yeah.
a little bit.
I I have to ask this question. Castrum says the words, he's Looney Tunas. So does this world have the Looney Tunes?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe I could see there being a land of cartoons, or cartoon-like characters. I mean, in the opening shot of one of the opening pages of the first issue, that crowd scene in the town trade bazaar or whatever that was by the wharf when Hope is trying to escape. There's a character in there that looks like it could be a cartoon character. So it's quite possible. We kind of want to feel like we don't want to limit ourselves to any possible idea for what could be in Echolands. So
I was actually wondering if they had the Looney Tunes on TV, but that's even better.
oh. we haven't established if they have TV there. That's one thing we have to think about.
Oh, that's true. I don't think I've seen one, and I'm just assuming. We got these little, again, Kirby-like robots working for the Oracle, drawn in a completely different style from the Oracle. What style is going into the Oracle?
I wanted something that was sort of like the type of art you would see on banners for a carnival. So like, the fortune teller type of painted art that you might see for something like that. And that's what was the inspiration for the metaphysicist page, actually. That whole thing looking like a banner that you might see at a carnival or circus.
I see that. But obviously the Oracle has gotten all of these different devices all throughout. It starts working on fixing up Castrum, fixing up Dina's arm.
Yeah.
What do you think about now having to draw Dina's arm all elaborately every time because of the new arm?
Actually, I think it's easier.
Really?
Yeah, because it's dealing a little bit more with anatomical stuff, rounder shapes, rather than trying to remember where all the bits and bobs are of the big industrial looking arm. So it's a little bit easier. It's trickier in maybe in the color process, because reinforcing
The metal?
yeah, Dave and I reinforcing the idea that the arms don't look like the same style as Dina.
Yeah.
So,
But it's one of those things that really makes the book interesting, that even one character can have multiple styles in them. I notice all of the food that the Oracle serves these 5 different people. It's, well, for 3 of them, it's their favorite food. Dina doesn't make a comment. I love how Castrum's is a slice of pizza. And because it would be. And Hope's is Rabbit's favorite food. Like, what's up with that one?
We just thought it was a good opportunity to remind people of her loss. You know, the readers all know at this point that Rabbit's alive.
Yeah.
But they all think he's dead. So it's, to see a food that, of course, it's a food that she likes, but the fact that it was Rabbit's favorite food, just can't help but remind her of her sorrow of losing him.
Is it possible that her favorite food is his favorite food?
Could be, yeah.
And therefore they have a kind of sisterly, sibling-like bond going on?
Yeah, because imagine, the way we start off the story, it's clear that all these people have known each other for a while. And some of them have known each other for a long period of time. And we hint at that in some of the dialogue in the beginning of issue 2, when Core is telling Rabbit to use the explosives like Hope taught him. So they've obviously had this past bond. I think the trick to quickly establishing characters' relationships is to make sure you write them in a way as if they've all had stories going already. Their lives have already been being lived. And so little things like that can indicate like, oh yeah, okay, they've got an established relationship for at least a period of time. And it's also a little bit clear when the pirates want to take Rabbit, and she's sort of like, no, she's like protective of him. Little things like that establish the care that she has, and that it's obviously, they've been with each other for a while.
That's one of the things that I really like most about this book, is that it starts at the beginning of the story, but the story itself is not the beginning of their lives. It's not the beginning of how they got together. I feel that this is an approach that a lot of comics don't really take. It's something that I see more in novels,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that bugs me sometimes when I see. I hate talking like this because then it sounds like I'm being critical of other creators. But I do understand the idea of a story. If the characters are to be real, you didn't start the story when they were born, right?
Yeah.
So for them to be real, you have to kind of treat them as if they've lived a life up until now, until the point you've now joined them to see where they're going now. And I kind of feel that way too. Like when a story ends, you should feel like, oh, there's going to be more life to this person beyond, unless they die, of course.
Yeah.
And
even then,
right. And it's like, I feel like this, you, by doing that, it allows you to, as a writer, to relate to them as real people, even if it's a fantastical setting. You have to believe in them being real.
mm-hmm.
I think I mentioned this before, like sometimes, characters will talk to me and they're telling me what needs to be said or what needs to happen, or how they're going to respond to something, it's super. I kind of agree with, like seeing stories that don't start off that way, where it's sort of like they're spelling it all out for you as if it's just been formed. I don't know. That when I see that sort of thing, it bugs me too. I prefer stories where the characters feel like they're alive and they've been around.
Yeah, because when you meet a new person in real life,
yeah,
that's you're not asking them right off the bat like about how they got there. It's you start to get to know that person, and then the information about all of that stuff comes out in the course of your getting to know that person
right
throughout the course of your relationship.
I mean, think about like in terms of another fantastical story that did that so effectively was the first Star Wars movie.
Yeah.
Great example. All those characters clearly have been living their lives, and we're just now getting to meet them, and we learn about their histories a little bit at a time, or who they are, the type of person they are, a little bit at a time as we go in the bigger context of what they're facing.
Yeah, it's also one of the things that bugs me whenever I see a new like for example, whenever I see a new superhero movie, it's just like it's always everybody's kind of it's insane because everybody's kind of in consensus that origin stories are slow until people figure out who they are, and yet that's the first thing they tell anyway.
Yeah. I'm glad that a lot of them have started to get away from that. Like as an example, one of the origin stories that was effective as far as superhero films is the way they handled Doctor Strange. They were able to get away with it. But I like how some of the things like Marvel did with the way they put the Avengers together. Not everyone had an origin story.
Yeah.
Which I thought was kind of cool. I like that because I don't think it needs to be every time, I guess the Captain America movie, the first one, was effective at an origin story too. But as a rule, I don't think it should be for everything. Like Black Panther is a great example.
Yeah, they didn't bother with that one.
Yeah. Not an origin story, so I don't think I guess it depends on the way it's done.
It's like how every time we have a Batman movie, we see his origin. It's like, stop.
Right. I hope the new one isn't going to do that.
I hope so too. It's like Adam West never showed his origin. Not that they would have, but
right. That would have been an interesting take, huh?
That would have been really weird. The Oracle says the words, I don't see everything. Some choices are still up to you, I guess.
Yeah.
So I feel like He doesn't believe that some choices are still up to you. It's just he has nothing to say at this point because he doesn't know what's going to happen.
Right. Yeah.
What is the
And
choice?
he even says, and the fact that he says that he doesn't see everything is kind of cool, because it's like, and even when you look at when he's looking into his crystal ball, it's his interpretation of what he's seeing too.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I kind of see that maybe he can see some of the bigger things, but maybe not all the nuances, which is kind of cool, because then it leaves you wondering about, like, well, what's going to happen, who's going to make it to, and all that kind of stuff. So
what is the inspiration for having this oracle dressed in this way, this archaic way, talk in such a modern fashion?
I don't know. I don't know if we really thought about that. The first lines we ever wrote for the character were, of course, the lines he has in issue 1. And we knew we wanted him to kind of speak in riddles about what he's seeing. And some of that kind of comes from inspiration from like things like, old EC comics like Tales from the Crypt, or, Vault,
I see
or,
that.
how you'd have those, characters that are going to tell you a story, and sometimes they would speak cryptically.
And sometimes they're a smartass.
Yeah. So I think that was the original inspiration, but when we decided that he was going to play a part in directly interacting, I don't know, we just wanted him to be relatable, sound relatable, even though he's so unusual looking. I think it helps the reader to be able to connect with him a little bit.
So they're trying to get away, and he unveils a rocket that I believe could only have come from Metamaru Mountain.
We'll see.
Which is why I said I feel like they will be reunited with Rabbit pretty soon. And of course, I know you're not going to tell me if they are, if they aren't. So what I'm going to ask is, in this page where you light everyone in shadow,
yeah,
very specifically, how difficult was it to light Castrum in shadow?
Yeah, he was kind of the trickiest one of the bunch, honestly, because I hadn't really drawn him with lots of shadows, and still, hard blacks anyway, except for his hair, or the vest he had. Yeah, so that was kind of tricky to make him still be clearly him, but have that dark shadow on him. That was, yeah, it worked, thank God.
I can see the challenges that you have to go through whenever you have to do these things.
Yeah.
And
fortunately, he has a very distinct nose.
and hairline. I'm excited to see where they go next, but I feel that with the metaphysicist page right after this, it's going to be not an easy departure, because we're looking at the crystal ball, and apparently the metaphysicist has travel-sized versions of this crystal ball. But it looks like Romulus is coming. So Romulus survives, and I think when the metaphysicist says, "I see more of me, I'm wearing rocket fuel for cologne, it'll drown out the smell of dead flesh," it feels like the rocket manages to escape, but something is about to die, or someone is about to die.
Or it's something else.
Or is it something else? Just please tell me the metaphysicist is safe, because I love these text issues.
The metaphysicist is safe.
Oh, okay.
You have to have a narrator through the entire thing.
There we go. And I love that he's drinking from a cup of coffee called Bad Brew. So speaking of the letter E, it took me 4 issues to notice the metaphysicist has 2 letter E's.
Oh, I thought you had noticed that before.
I think, I saw it and I was like, oh, okay, it's a logo thing. And then I see it in the chair, specifically the second letter E. Is there a
And
reason
that same version of the E has appeared elsewhere besides the orb transit thing that they were on. It's been in the background of other places.
I'm gonna have to take a look at
areas.
that? Is there what is is there a reason behind the two different E's?
Yes.
You I assume you cannot tell me that reason.
Nope.
So this is definitely gonna play a part as we move forward, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And
Okay.
that same shape of the second E that you're recognizing, you'll know it's the same shape of an E that's in the logo.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's in the logo of the series, and it's also in the logo of the Echo.
Yeah.
Which brings us again to A Spell with a Wizard and this gaslighting megalomaniac, Taros Demon. Is anything more emblematic of human society at the moment, where somebody says the words, "What stories are true?" and then he says, "What is truth? Do you accept anything I've said so far as truth? Truth is a fluid thing. It shifts and transforms depending on the author and the audience."
Yep.
It feels
it's so true. That's a truer statement if I've ever heard one based on today.
Our biased perceptions affect truths more than we're willing to admit. And you've accused me of wanting to rule the world that reveals your truth. I feel like the thing with Taros Demon is you're doing that thing with, like, as all great supervillains do, is that he absolutely believes in the justness of his cause.
Of course, yeah.
He's a true believer. So he's never lying as far as he's concerned. That's very interesting. And I think that's a great hook as we move forward.
And what I like about it in relation to his perspective about who he is and his role in things and how self-important he feels, it also tangentially speaks to the idea of fate and what one believes about their own destiny. So it thematically kind of fits a little bit with what this issue is talking about. So
how much of Echolands would you say is about fate versus free will?
I don't know. I don't know if I can answer that clearly. I can answer it metatextually. So the fact, this might seem a little strange, but the fact that we know where everything is going, we know what the story is on. So as writers, we know the fate of these characters. But what we don't know is how some of those little things that we decided on might change as we go, because new ideas come to us. So even though we know what the final fate is, the littler fates might alter as we go,
Just as in this issue, you originally had the scene planned out for Hope, Core, and Rabbit.
Right.
So originally, where were the others?
They didn't exist.
Oh. So this was way before.
Yeah. So essentially, when we wrote issue 1, okay, we knew that there were certain aspects of the world that we were going to get to and show, but certain characters in relation to those worlds, or those lands, I should say, we didn't have. So some of the reader's introduction to those ideas would have been when Hope and Core and Rabbit got there. So, like, going to Horror Hill or Old Chicago or whatever, that would have been the first taste of those things. But when we wrote the end of issue 1, and we had Hope do her thing, and there's been these soldiers had busted in on them and started killing everyone in the room. I started to feel like when we got to that scene and then started to write issue 2, that it was too convenient that the characters we had decided were our main cast were the only ones to survive. And so I talked to Hayden about it and said, I think actually we should create a broader cast to have some others survive that, which would allow us to give tastes of some of those other lands that we had already originally thought about. And so, Rosa, Castrum, Dina, Caniff, none of those characters were thought about until we wrote the opening scenes of issue 2. So they were sort of invented at that moment, which was for the best, I think, because it broadened our cast and made the story richer, and it also allowed us, I don't know, it makes it more interesting and more diverse, which is what I think it needed. That's why we ended up, I think it's why it bugged us, and we ended up coming up with that. And the other thing that's fun about that is it made it to where, when you read the first issue, you think you know who the cast is, but then you get to the second chapter and you're introduced to more people, and you're like, oh, this place is big.
It's huge.
And then, right. And then you get to the third issue and we now meet some other people. And you're like, oh, it's bigger than that. You know what I mean? Which is, I think, just enriches the whole thing. It's what it needed.
And that points out to me that that Rabbit, who is off on his own right now, and was one of the original cast, does this mean that there is a much bigger role for him in the future?
Yes and no. When we decided to do what we did with him, actually, I think even at one point we had thought about that he would have died, but that might have, because we went through a couple different variations of what to do with some of the plot. One of them, he might have died. But when we decided to have him get lost, that opened up a whole interesting parameter for being able to show parts of the Echolands that the main cast doesn't see, because it's through his eyes. And now that, and that will become much more clear in the next issue of what we're going to do with him. How big his role will be by the end, we haven't decided on. But he will have, he will learn certain things about himself along the way. So
the speaking of the next issue, the cover to the next issue has Teros Demand. The arrow thing on his robe has Hope right in it. Does this mean that they will meet in the next issue?
No.
Okay. Because the other covers have been fairly accurate so far.
Right. You could take this one as more of a symbolic aspect that he is doggedly needing to catch her and to catch the gem. So
the letters page in the back, again, people, you can email Echolands at theredhoodclub@gmail.com. How does it feel knowing that you're still getting letters, with this book, like saying that, oh, you're inspiring me to make my own comic? This is such an inspiration.
Yeah, it's always great when you hear that sort of thing, that it's humbling to know that you've touched someone in that way to where they inspires them to be creative. That's, I think, I guess I can't speak for every creator out there, but I would like to think that every creator out there wants to be inspirational. They don't want, I can't imagine they only want their stories to be appreciated, but I think they would like to think that people who do appreciate what they're doing might open themselves up to the creativity of their own self, you know.
Yeah.
I think it's cool.
I find that funny. I'll tell you why. I'm editing an interview right now with an artist whose style is so eccentric. And right before we came on, he, you know, in the editing process, he had just said the words, I don't really feel like I'm going to be an influence to anyone because my style is so weird.
Well, then if it's weird, he's probably going to be inspirational.
I'll tell you who it is when we're off the call.
Okay.
And I also, like, how do you feel about, you know, people like Liam Sharp tweeting that this is such a great comic and it's, you know, very, very inspiring comic?
Yeah, it was very gracious of him to do that. And I've heard from a few other, you know, creators, like sometimes when I randomly post a piece of art from that I've been working on, you know, I'll hear from some other comics creators that, you know, that like it or whatever. That's always, I mean, that's the cream right there. You know, when you hear from your peers that they dig what you're doing, it's always so cool. I try to do that as much as I can too. When I see work from other creators, I try to either I like it or I'll say something, you know, I'm like, oh, that's so good, or, you know, that sort of thing. I think it's good for other creators to be in the corner of the others, you know.
Yeah.
It builds a healthy environment, because particularly in comics, I mean, in comics, most of us are so isolated doing our thing on our own. And so that encouraging words can mean a lot, you know. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, because you don't know if what you're doing is actually you know, if people are going to care or not, you know. So
People care. So volume 1 is actually now available for pre-order. If you go on Amazon specifically, it says that the release date will be March 29, 2022.
What? No, it's June.
It's June? Okay.
That's what I think. I don't know why that might be old information.
That's
So
yeah. I was gonna say that's not the first time Amazon has lied to me about a release date.
if I remember correctly, in previews, it's in the new catalog for Diamond Previews, and I think it
Okay.
says advanced solicited for June.
June 2022. Okay.
It better be June, because anytime sooner than that, it's too soon, because we have to figure out all the design work on it. So
I was gonna ask, what, how is it gonna be bigger?
it's going to be, yeah, it'll be bigger than this. Sort of, I don't have an example, but you know, like the DC deluxe size.
Like the black label size?
No, they call it deluxe size hardcover. Like they're doing all the new editions of Sandman are coming out in the deluxe size hardcover.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So it's like, it's one step up. It's like an inch and a half bigger both directions or something like that. So like, here's the issue. So I think it's like this.
That's nice.
Yeah. So it's a little bit bigger, which is good. We'll see how well it does. I'm hoping that I'm considering whenever we get to a soft cover version, which probably won't be for, I can't imagine, until 2023.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can do the soft cover at that same size.
Well,
I think it'd be cool.
Will you be keeping all of the content that's currently in the single issues?
Everything is going to be in there. The part that we're debating whether it should be in there, I was talking with the designer last night a little bit about it, saying we got to start figuring it out. We're not sure if we're going to have the music list in there. We might keep that as exclusive to the singles.
What about the letters pages?
Probably exclusive to the singles.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
But I mean, that might change. I don't know. Because the designer is like, yeah, maybe we should leave the music list to the singles, but then he's like, but it's so cool, maybe we should stick it all in the back. And I'm like, that's gonna be a lot of things to list in the back. That's gonna be like pages, unless if he makes them all single space, then it won't eat up so many pages. I don't know. But all the content for the interviews and the fake ads and the cartoon, all that stuff is going to be, and the Oracle page, the metaphysics page, all that stuff is going to remain intact in order, in publishing order. So because it's story, I feel like all those things are story relevant and pertain to the Echolands directly.
Yeah.
So it felt like, no, those things need to be there. So you'll read a chapter and you'll have like this little break insert in a way, so people could read it as one shot at a time if they want. But those things being story relevant, they could just keep going. I guess a music list would have made more sense to stick at the end of each chapter like it is in the comics, if we had been smart enough to make it part of the magazine. So
well,
but we made it personalized to me. So yeah, definitely not part of the magazine.
you watch. Image is gonna take all of this music and put it in a Spotify playlist.
That'd be awesome. That'd be a lot of work.
I'm sure somebody can do it.
Someone was asking me on either Instagram or on Twitter, was asking me if I was going to make a Spotify list of it, and I'm like, I've never used Spotify, so I have no idea what that would entail, especially for whole albums. So it's like I don't know.
Yeah, you would have to type it, drag it all, but that's a lot of that's a lot of music.
Yeah.
And will you be keeping the blurbs at the back?
Yes.
That's cool, because they're really world building. This one's about food.
Yeah, I think it's funny. I've heard from a few people that have glossed over those and haven't read them.
Really?
Yeah, I'm like, no, they're story relevant. They're like the part of the world. But this issue, a typo got past us. Francisco is spelled wrong.
Really?
It's funny, my spell check keeps missing that when I type
Francisco? Really?
Yeah.
It is. Yeah.
So funny. I mean, that's happened to us a few times, but we missed this one.
That's okay. It's okay. You know, one of those things where you're reading it and you're like, okay, yeah, I didn't notice until you pointed it out.
Right. And what's funny is the raw cut has fixed that. The raw cut version will have that part fixed. But yeah, I haven't decided where they should go. I don't know if they should go at the end of each issue, or if we should have, say, like the cover be,
then
you flip it, and then that part is after the cover, and then you get page one.
Oh, because you would get rid of this, right?
Yeah, that might be relegated to just be something up front at the front of the book. But for the individual chapters, we might not do that. We'll see. A lot of decisions have still to be made. The only design thing I've done for it myself so far is I created the end papers. So
what about additional content?
I don't know. We have to see what the pagination relies on. Someone was asking me if it was going to include the raw cut content. It will not. Yeah, it would be twice as thick, and we'd have to charge you $60 for that. So,
will there be a version for the raw cut?
We haven't decided on that. Probably not. I think if the sales for the raw cut were as equally robust, then maybe. But if we ever get to do like a super premium edition way down the road, for sure we would use it there. But as far as additional content, maybe there'll be something like select pages. We'll probably use the variant covers, things like that. But we might show select pages of art before it was colored. I don't know. Sometimes those decisions depend on how many pages
Or
you need
left.
to fill because the way it's printed.
Yeah, I get that.
Signatures or whatever.
Did
Certain store, I can tell you this. I think there's an incentive program that if stores order a certain number of copies, they will get signed bookplates. I've already done the art for that. So
very interesting.
yeah.
Very interesting. So can I tell you a little trick that I learned when in the few years I worked at a library?
Sure.
If this doesn't fit in this way to a shelf, you're supposed to not shelve it this way. The spine's supposed to go at the bottom.
Interesting.
Yeah, because otherwise gravity's going to kill it.
Interesting.
Especially if it's hardbound, and then it'll start sagging in the middle. The problem is if,
even if it's sewn binding, even with some sewn binding.
Well, in a library, they got books that go over 100 years, so it all catches up. But the problem is this one is not aesthetically pleasing.
Right. Yeah, true.
I will say that in the library. Yeah. Okay.
Oh no, I was just gonna say I almost wish the book did well enough. This is something we'll probably, if the book is, we managed to get to the point where we can justify doing a super premium version. My idea of that is extra big. Therefore,
absolute sized.
That's what I would hope. Absolute sized, maybe even bigger than that, because my thought is if we can get to a point where we can do the ultimate version, is that every spread is its own page. So the book would actually be extra wide. Therefore, you'd have to have a slipcase to reinforce what you're talking about for the libraries.
Absolutely. I will say, small anecdote, the library I worked at, while shelving books one day, I picked up a random book off the shelf because I saw the title. It was A Houseboat on the Styx.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh, I know this one. That was interesting. That was an interesting bit of coincidence.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else you would like to tell us going into number 5 or?
Not really, other than we're gonna, as we've been showing, we're gonna learn more about the world a little bit, but this time from a different character's point of view. The main cast gets to finally have a little downtime, which I think is good. It's we got 4 issues going, and so they get to have a moment of to be themselves a little bit, which I think will be good.
And what is J.H. Williams III reading or watching right now?
So I'm reading this right now.
Oh, interesting. Christmas Story.
Yeah. It's the original writings from Gene Shepherd. It's really good. I love that movie. It's like one of my favorite movies. It's just ridiculously funny. And I didn't know, it's so weird. For the longest time I've watched that movie, but never noticed in the credits it's based on the writings of so-and-so, Gene Shepherd. I'm like, oh, I'll go investigate that. And then sure enough, there's a little hardcover book available. So I'm like, I gotta get that. Because at this time of year, I always like to read stuff that's centered around the holiday. I do that with Halloween as well. So I'll read comics or books about Christmas or whatever, like things like that. But what
Same.
fascinated about this is that even though a lot of the stories in here are made it into the movie, they're slightly different. So like the way it opens way different than it does in the movie. It's actually you're with you're with Ralphie when he's older, actually, at the beginning of
Oh,
this.
okay.
Um, and then one of the stories in here, which I haven't read yet, have you seen the movie?
Yeah, it was a long time ago.
Oh,
But
okay. Do you remember the scene where the dogs destroy Christmas dinner? Do you remember
vaguely.
that? So in the book, this is actually not Christmas dinner; it's Easter.
Oh,
So that's interesting.
that doesn't sound like a Christmas story.
Yeah. So it's like, so in this book, they put it in there because it was in the movie, uh, even though it's a different holiday. So,
Mhm.
so like a little bonus story. But it's fascinating because when I'm reading it, you can hear uh you can hear that same voice that's narrating the movie. It's got the same wit that the film has. So you can see why the film was so brilliant at what it did, because the source material is so good. Um, so yeah, that's super fun.
Very cool.
Uh, but yeah, I like reading stuff centered around the holidays. Even if it's something weird, like um, a book I recommend people could read for around the Christmas is Krampus by Brom.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
I think you mentioned that in a
Oh,
previous
have I?
interview, actually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, I finished finally reading the Santa Claus book by Bill Sienkiewicz,
Oh,
and
that's
I'm like,
great, isn't it?
wow, okay, I
So good.
didn't expect this.
Yeah, so good. If you want to read another interesting book about Santa Claus that surprisingly has some dark parts to it, the Santa Claus Stories by Frank L. Baum.
Hmm.
So if you
Wizard of
Google,
Oz.
if you Google Santa Claus Frank L. Baum, it'll come up, and you can get current editions. The edition I have has illustrations by Eric Shanower.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Um, so that's really nice. But there's various editions available, I think. I read that last year, and that was really good. You can tell it's Frank L. Baum. It has those whimsical things in it, but there's a lot of really weird stuff in there too. They're like, oh, okay, that's kind of dark.
Eric Shanower, the other guy who drew Promethea.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Okay.
He's brilliant.
He's great. Uh, all right. Thank you so much. I am looking forward to the next issue of Echolands. I believe that's out at the end of December. And I can't believe you're 2/3 of the way done with the first arc.
It's insane. I'm still drawing issue 7. So I'm all I just started pages 10 and 11 of issue 7. So
You should set an issue in Castrom's land so that it'll go a little quicker.
yeah, the sequences I've been drawing for this issue, I was telling Hayden today, I'm like, yeah, it's 2 weeks per spread.
Mm-hmm.
So do the math. It's like,
Are you almost done though?
no, I'm on 10, 11
Okay.
of 24.
Okay.
So yeah,
You'll be done in March.
yeah, it's insane. It's just, but at the same time, it's like I as frustrating as it is that some of the pages are taking that long. I can't see doing them any other way.
Yeah, of
So
course. The work
it's
is the
gonna be one
work.
of the yeah, it's just gonna be one of those things where people, they're gonna have to be patient. So
Well, there is a break between 6 and 7, so
yeah, yeah. But
so
it'll be a little bit of time. It's a discussion. We have to still figure out how we're going to roll out the second arc, particularly because the pages are taking so long, particularly on issue 7 and issue 8 has sequences. They're just, like I said, they're 2 weeks for 2 pages. So
It's okay.
that's a lot of time.
It's okay. It'll be worth the wait. We waited 15 years, so
I hope people feel that way. And they don't get to the end of issue 6 and go, damn it, how long do I have to wait? Screw that guy.
go read something else, people, or read it again. As you can
Yes.
tell, there's things that you will pick up if you read it again.
Yes, read it again. That's one of the things that we are really hoping for, is to create something that people will want to reread.
Yeah.
So
Thank you, Sir J.H. Williams III.
thanks.